Welcome one and all to our third LinkedIn live session where we bring in industry experts and talk about some of the key topics in the industrial automation space. A quick background to this LinkedIn live series. The goal is to drive engagement and to build deeper connections with our network and use this platform to discuss different key developments in the industry so that we can all learn from experts. So today's session is on OPC UA for embedded devices. And so let's take a step back. You may be aware of our previous session on OPC, touched upon by one of our in-house experts, Mr. Praveen. So Praveen touched upon how OPC UA can play a role in some of the business implications that it can play for enabling digital transformation as well as IoT solutions. So if you've not had a chance to check that out, I'd highly recommend you do so by visiting our LinkedIn and YouTube page. So similar to this, we have more such discussions lined up with industry experts on different topics in the industrial automation space. So with that, let's get started with today's discussion on OPC UA for embedded devices. So to discuss this topic, I have with me our in-house OPC expert, Mr. Chhatrapati, or CP as we fondly call him here. And so a quick background on Chhatrapati. He has over 15 years of experience in the industrial automation space. He's worked on different product solutions for customers across the world. And this extensive experience has led him to be formally recognized by the OPC Foundation as an OPC expert. And we're very proud to have him here in Utthunga leading our OPC services portfolio. Also, Chhatrapati has been very instrumental in working with different groups in these consortiums, like the OPC Foundation, for example, for the OPC UA specification, and most recently the OPC UA PubSub specification, and has also been working closely for the other industrial communication working groups as well. So I think with that experience, he is the right person for today's discussion. So let's dive into it. Hi, Chhatrapati.
Hi, Nityan. Thank you. Thank you for being.
So today we're talking about embedded devices and OPC UA in general, right? So let's start with this for the benefit of our audience. So can you highlight the different types of embedded devices that can employ OPC UA?
Okay. So when you look at the ISA architecture of industrial automation, in the pyramid there are different layers starting from sensors, controllers, and so forth. So OPC UA as a technology is a very scalable technology, and it is at the down layers it is still evolving into much more than a simple monitoring mechanism. So with the recent specification of FLC, which is in still release candidate state, so it is possible to have controller to controller, controller to device, and as well as device to device communications as well. So given this and its scalability capabilities, it can be implemented starting from a very low footprint sensor to a gateway to a PLC, so anywhere up. So yeah.
So I think what we've understood from that is essentially OPC UA can enable vertical integration of the shop floor data like L0 and L1, like you mentioned, all the way up to enterprise applications, as well as inter-device and inter-machine interfaces. And great. So
yes, definitely. So it can enable you for both vertical and horizontal integrations, and in addition to that, it can actually coexist along with existing infrastructure as a separate communication line where all the layers of ISA architecture can push data or pull data from that.
Got it. Okay, which sort of brings me to the next next topic, where a couple of years back, one of the leading research groups, which does a lot of market survey on different topics in the industrial automation space, did an extensive survey on OPC UA and the progress it has had over the years since it was established and sort of formally released for the OEMs and different customers to implement. It was estimated that more than about 50 million devices are currently deployed worldwide that have OPC natively implemented in the form of a client or a server or any such applications. And we're also seeing like these big industrial groups like VDMA and MDIS who've been such staunch proponents for OPC UA, and they've decided that that is the way forward for interoperability, and they're working with different groups, formalizing different things. So, what are some of the reasons why we are seeing such large scale adoption, and what sort of business implications does implementing OPC UA present?
Okay, so it's a two-part question. So as I understand, so if you look at the reasons, there are several different reasons for this growth in OPC UA devices in the market and as well as on the field level as well. So the first thing is it is scalable. So that means at any layer of the industrial automation pyramid, you can adapt to OPC UA. And second reason, OPC UA, unlike majority of the industrial communication protocols, not just an industrial communication protocol. So it's much more than that. It has security inbuilt at the protocol level. It has a very rich information model mechanism, so based on which you can come up with your own information models to adapt to. And several different information models have been already standardized for specific applications, like a CNC machine or for MT Connect. And then some information models have been standardized to map to any of the existing communication protocols as well. For example, Profinet to OPC UA, BACnet to OPC UA, and so on. So it's much more than a simple data exchange mechanism. So you can exchange the data, and then you can model the data how you want your data to be presented, and all the metadata that carries with OPC UA nodes makes each data point as an information, not just a data. So it just upgrades each of these data points to an information. Like for example, when you look at a variable value, you'll have at what time that was the value for it. So and security wise, security, just having an encryption and decryption is not just security. It's much more than that. So there are user level securities in place, and based on who logged in, a specific set of data will be available for specific users. So based on whether you are a supervisor, whether you are an administrator, whether you are just a plant foreman, based on that, the specific set of data accessibility as well as kept. And with most of the components now adapting to these standardized information models, the downtime is much less, because the way you replace a device, you don't have to go through of the entire configuration from the scratch. So once you reach to a point where you have to replace a device, then because the entire application is built to a specific information model, then even underlying device getting replaced doesn't affect the rest of the application. So like this, there are several reasons why it is a very rich platform to represent industrial information and to have a communication exchange as well. So the fueling to that is the OPC PubSub specification, which expands into two layers. One is to the very lowest layer, where Ethernet frames based OPC PubSub communication allows to have controller to controller, controller to device kind of communications, and as well as the same PubSub specification already standardized how it's going to use MQTT and AMQP kind of messaging protocols to enable live connectivity. So with this, it's like the entire pyramid is covered from end to end with OPC.
Got it. So I think you touched upon the information models and how it's easy for these specific applications to sort of like package data in a better manner, the security and sort of like other things like PubSub, which enables like vertical integration, platform integration, and all of that. Great. So thanks for those insights. And I think with what we sort of like wanted to touch upon here is like why is it progressing so much, and where is this headed towards to? And I think with what we've sort of understood is with any technology to progress in the industrial automation space, or for any industry for that matter, there has to be real business impacts. And it looks like OPC UA is doing all of that. And it's probably at that inflection point, looking at the whole the survey data to see there is probably exponential growth happening over the next decade or so. So, so we've now understood what the role of OPC UA in embedded devices are and some of these business applications, right? So you've worked very closely with some of these OEMs and device manufacturers worldwide. Can you briefly touch upon the typical challenges these OEMs and device manufacturers face while they want to implement OPC UA?
So, if you want to do something with OPC, then based on what level of customization you need for your specific OPC application, you may want to customize to have only a specific set of features based on memory constraints or other resource constraints of your hardware. And then based on the kind of application, you may want to design your information model, and then you may want to have it as a coexisting mechanism along with any other industrial communication protocol. So like this, based on these requirements, there would be a different kinds of challenges in each of those cases. So some of the common challenges are having good understanding of OPC UA specification and the profiles and how the OPC UA security works, and when they go to a decision making level, whether their hardware platform is good enough to have OPC on them, or what kind of stacks they can pick up to develop OPC UA applications for their specific implementation, and then to a stage where they need to verify and validate whether their implementation is in compliance with OPC UA specification. So for all this, you would have to have an in-house capabilities, like building an in-house capabilities along all these lines is a very challenging for OEMs. So that's where most of the technology provider companies who might have already faced these challenges by providing services to multiple OEMs executing different diversified projects and product developments will come in handy.
Got it. So that's very interesting, because I think what we can infer or understand from what you mentioned there is that it's not as straightforward as easy for OEMs to set up like internal teams with OPC experience, and there is a learning curve that's involved. And
yes,
also
definitely.
with these products, from what you were saying, they need to understand the specification, and that specification also evolves over time, right? So
yes.
with that, the product also has to evolve over time, and maintaining that product over a life cycle might be a challenge, and there might be a lot of things to take care of for the OEMs.
Yes, exactly. So getting done with the development doesn't stop. So from there onwards, so the entire product lifecycle management, and as and when specific implications are coming in, like a specific new feature comes in, you want to adapt to that, or any specific security policy has become absolute now, you would have to upgrade your products to meet the new security specifications. So all of this takes time and effort, and yeah, that's the main challenge for
Got it.
OEMs. Yeah.
Great. So I think previously you also mentioned about these stacks and SDKs and all of these that are available at the OEMs or device manufacturers' disposal. So let's take this scenario where you have a device manufacturer, an OEM, making a flow meter or a level sensor, Uh, Typically, these devices are embedded devices, and uh, they are not their primary sort of function, or their whole the reason behind why they are what they are in the L0 L1 layer is to either sense or to actuate, right? So they want to just transduce that signal, convert it into a specific sort of communication thing, and then send it over a physical layer. When you sort of bring OPC UA into the picture here, there might be some level of complexity involved to embed that and onto the same platform. So, what usually is the solution for tackling such situations? Because more likely there will be like normal microcontroller based devices, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
what is the solution for something like this?
So OPC UA is very much scalable. So you can pick and choose exactly what pieces of OPC UA server you would like on your device. So you can go with the very lowest footprint uh, nano profile, and this profile has been already standardized by the OPC Foundation. And then there is next micro embedded and standard like this. There are different profiles has been defined by the foundation, and again these profiles are not fixed, like they have been standardized, but you can pick any of the profile and you can again customize to have specific feature sets. So the standard term is facets, so you can pick and choose the facets that you would need for your specific device, and only those parts you can build as part of your stack, and then build the application on top of it and use it. So from that perspective, if you look at it, it is very much possible.
Got it.
But
Got it.
again,
So
for
essentially,
you
like,
to go through this whole ordeal, you should have the uh, technical knowledge and understanding and experience on
got
how
it.
to type these things.
So essentially, you have underlying micro or whatever nano profiles that you mentioned against what your device capabilities and platform that is available, and you put it in, and then you decide how the whole thing works, right? Okay, great.
Yes.
So,
So we can look at it from two perspectives. So one is, if you already have a device and you are looking to upgrade it to enable OPC in it, then there has to be a proper feasibility study based on the current utilization of resources, how much more is there, and whether within that can OPC fit, or what profile can be fit to that, and so on. But if it is a new product, then of course you have a little more wiggle room.
okay, okay, great, great. So I think with these points, we've sort of briefly understood what it entails for the OEMs and device manufacturers to consider implementing OPC UA in embedded devices. So, which sort of brings me to the next thing, where what is since you're leading the whole OPC services portfolio and you're working closely with these customers, right? For the general audience to understand, uh, what are the typical offerings from Utthunga from a services or a general perspective, and also from the embedded point of view, since we were discussing more on this today.
So there are several different technology service provider companies, several few technology service provider companies in OPC, and each of them have their own strengths in specific area. Like there are few companies who only sell stack SDKs. So if you want to develop an application, you should have the rest of the OPC knowledge to take that stack and build on top of the application, do the compliance verification, and so on, right? So like that, everyone have their own little piece of focused offerings. But since we are mainly into a products and services based company in the industrial automation space, we have capabilities starting from a very low footprint embedded implementation till the very performance intensive full-fledged standard servers, and to the level where we have different cloud applications deployed in the cloud. And we have a team capable of coming up with your own information model based on the specific application. And we have a team that are familiar with different types of stacks that are already available in the market, either open source or commercially available stacks. So, with all this experience and knowledge, we'll be able to do anything with respect to OPC. Nitin. Yeah.
Got it, got it. So essentially, we do have a sort of vendor neutral approach to this whole thing of like working with the customer hand in hand with offering services, solutions, portfolios for the whole OPC range, and then deciding on what's best suitable for their use case, and then
Yeah.
having that whole solution in place.
Yeah.
Nice. So
So
you
we have worked with the customers in starting from scratch, designing and developing their OPC related products. In some cases, we have created a platform for the customer so that the customer's own product development team can use this platform and develop products on top of it. So we work with several OEMs and very diversified OPC projects we have been executing for the last decade or so.
Interesting, interesting. So you're basically like accelerating their time to market as well as reducing probably the overheads and all of that we discussed. Yeah, great. So I just want to briefly touch on this. You briefly mentioned earlier about the whole role that the pub sub server or a bridge can play in embedded devices and all of that. Can you maybe stress on some specific points related to that and how that came about and where this is sort of positioned currently in the market?
So this pub sub bridge is where a specific component have a OPC publishing and subscribing both capabilities, and it can so based on what kind of application that is there, so it can publish and subscribe. So this again can work in two levels. So one, at an IIoT or gateway level, it can use the MQTT, MQP based communications to have IIoT connectivity. Customers will have their own strengths, like different companies have their own strengths. So if some of them are having a very focused knowledge on building a IoT based analytics application, then we can help them in pushing the data to that application via OPC. So they can focus on utilizing the data and coming up with all these insights based on the data that they are consuming. And the OPC specific handling everything we can do. So keeping that in mind, what are all the common challenges that customers are facing to solve that? That's where it led to our PubSub based bridge product.
Interesting. Great. I think we've fairly covered in brief what this whole embedded for OPC UA devices can sort of offer for the OEMs and device manufacturers and sort of bring about their whole the product development lifecycle, right? So now I think we're in a position to sort of take some questions from our audience, and let me just quickly look at the comments. So one of the questions here says, what is the smallest or the minimum memory footprint required to implement OPC UA?
Okay, so there are implementations with a few tens of KBs of memory footprint size with OPC, but then again, it depends on exactly what are your requirements. So starting from few tens of KBs, it goes upwards based on what kind of address space you have and how many nodes you are going to have and what kind of data points you are exposing, so and so.
Got it. The other question here is that what are the different protocols that can work in conjunction with the OPC UA in embedded devices?
Okay, so there is no specific restriction, but it depends on the specific use case that you are trying to solve. So most of the Ethernet-based protocols like Modbus TCP, Ethernet IP, Profinet, and so on can work in conjunction with OPC. And there
Mhm.
can be other devices where for OPC specific communication there is separate TCP/IP port and other hardware requirements meeting the rest of the communication protocol. So it's just a matter of having enough resources on the device and then loading it in parallel with the actual industrial protocol.
Yeah, I think you touched upon the whole MQTT, MQP thing earlier as well, right? So that's becoming a pretty popular sort of way of framing data along with the OPC UA and with the whole PubSub thing coming about, like you said. I think there's no limits to what this can do. Like it's just dependent on the use case, I believe.
Yes, so OPC PubSub for its own data publishing and subscription itself uses MQTT and AMQP messaging protocols. So it's not a coexistence. That's the necessity. Like when it comes to OPC or
Right.
PubSub in an IoT gateway.
Okay, so the other question states, I think this is fairly in line with the first question that was asked, where what is the latency factor and sort of like I think what the question means is essentially uh, is there any like a latency factor that is involved here in terms of like what is the smallest sort of latency factor that has been
Hmm.
sort of implemented or based on your experience you've sort of come
Okay,
across.
okay. So this number is coming down uh, rapidly. So like with client server communication, it was a little higher, like usually 1 second or above is the most commonly seen timing I've seen. But with WhatsApp communication, this number is coming down, and I've come across research where they have demonstrated with less than 50 microsecond latency WhatsApp communication. So, but it's not going to stay there. I think it's going to come down a little further with the overall TSN on WhatsApp with raw Ethernet frames on TSN. With
Mhm.
that combination, that's going to come down even further, is what I think.
So, just for probably our understanding, when you say it's going to come down, is that because of the whole processing capabilities that are improving at these devices, or is it from the whole physical layer itself?
Yeah, it's more on like how the OPC is becoming more and more capable to configure itself as a TSN stream, and rest of the TSN network components in the network as well are configured to match against the streams that are configured by the OPC PubSub. So then when the entire network components and the protocol they work in unison on a TSN network, that's
Mhm.
where you'll see the uh, absolute performance.
Got it, got it. I think we have time for another question that probably you can take. Where um, as an OEM or a device manufacturer, what are some of the typical hardware and software considerations for them to implement OPC UA?
Okay, so again, it starts with what are your device or application level requirements,
Mhm.
and then to that, when we add OPC, so what kind of performance you are expecting from the OPC implementation when you add to the base requirements of your application. So considering all these requirements, you would have to kind of uh, backtrack to what kind of resources you would need, and for that resources and for that specific performance, what kind of stack you would have to use. If you are going for a more focused publishing kind of application, would you like to have a RTOS based platform, or even a bare metal implementation? So these are all different factors that would come in, but majority of these would be driven from the requirements perspective, application
Got it. Got
requirements.
it. Great. I think we've covered pretty much in brief what this whole entails for OEMs as well as device manufacturers. I think so. We're at the 30-minute mark. So thank you everyone for taking your time off and having attended this session. And thank you very much, Chhatrapati, for your insights on this. So with that, we've come to the end of the session, but I think we've also come to the close of the year, so and the beginning of the holiday season. So from everyone at Utthunga, we wish you all a very happy and a wonderful Christmas and a New Year. My name is Nitin, and stay safe, and we will see you again in the next session in the coming month. And see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.